The silver tray caught the light, reflecting the polished mahogany of the dining hall. Eleanor moved the cloth in steady, circular motions, removing every smudge until the surface was mirror-perfect. She did not look up, even as the voices rose in the center of the room. Daniel slammed a heavy palm onto the table, the sound echoing against the high ceilings. Victoria paced, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, while Marcus stood by the window, ticking off figures on a notepad. To them, Eleanor was merely part of the room's furniture, a fixture as permanent and unremarkable as the chandelier above. She shifted her weight, the tray tucked firmly under one arm, and reached for the next piece of cutlery. For 30 years, this had been the rhythm of her life, the constant polishing of a legacy she would never own, surrounded by people who never asked her name. She stepped back as Marcus gestured wildly, his hand narrowly missing her shoulder. He did not notice her, he did not apologize. She simply adjusted her grip, kept her eyes lowered, and continued her work. The argument surged around her, fueled by greed and arrogance, while she remained the only constant in a house drifting toward its own decay. The library door was cracked open just enough for a sliver of light to spill out. Charles stood in the hallway, his knuckles white as he gripped the head of his cane. Inside, the voices of his children were stripped of all pretense. They were not discussing his health or his comfort. They were calculating the value of the estate, debating which parcels of land to liquidate the moment his heart stopped. Daniel laughed, a dry, hollow sound that turned Charles's stomach. He saw them pacing the floor, tracing lines on maps of his life's work as if it were already a carcass to be scavenged. He felt the weight of his own frailty pressing down, his breath hitching in the tight space of the hall. He turned his head and saw Eleanor standing in the shadows of the corridor, her eyes fixed on the floor, her expression steady and pained. She had heard every word. She did not move to intervene, but her presence was a sudden, sharp anchor in his storm. He looked back at his children, the cold reality of their greed finally settling into his bones. He turned away from the door, his movements slow and deliberate, and retreated toward the study. He had to call his lawyer. He had to change everything before it was too late. The chapel was filled with the scent of lilies and the low, rhythmic hum of camera shutters. Daniel stood by the mahogany casket, his head bowed, his hands clasped tight to ensure the lenses caught his display of mourning. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, pausing just long enough for a reporter to snap the perfect, sorrowful frame. Marcus moved through the rows of guests, nodding with practiced solemnity, his voice lowered to a whisper that carried perfectly to the front pews. They had turned the funeral into a final business transaction, a performance designed to secure their public image. At the very back of the room, near the cold stone of the entrance, Eleanor stood motionless. She did not look at the cameras. She did not seek the spotlight. She held her hands folded at her waist, her gaze fixed on the simple wooden casket. The contrast was absolute. While the siblings adjusted their posture for the flashing lights, Eleanor remained anchored in genuine loss. The lawyer moved down the center aisle, a leather briefcase tucked under his arm, his eyes scanning the room until they found the siblings. He signaled for them to gather. The performance was ending. The cameras shifted focus, waiting for the final act. As the room fell into a heavy, expectant silence, the lawyer broke the seal on the thick envelope. The siblings shifted forward, their eyes bright with the anticipation of wealth. He began to read. The first words were dry, standard legalities, but the tone shifted abruptly. Daniel's posture slumped. Victoria's hand stopped midair. The lawyer did not pause for their interruptions. He pressed a remote on the table. A large screen flickered to life. Charles appeared, sitting in his favorite armchair, his eyes sharp and clear. "You seek what I built," he said to the camera, his voice steady, "but you never understood the foundation." The screen displayed the legal transfer of the entire estate to a charitable trust, with Eleanor named as the sole executor and primary beneficiary of the residential wing. The room went dead. Daniel stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor, his face drained of color. Victoria looked at the screen, then at the lawyer, her mouth opening, but no sound emerged. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. Eleanor remained in the back, her hands trembling, eyes fixed on the man on the screen who had finally spoken for her. She saw the siblings turn toward her, their expressions shifting from shock to rage. But she did not look away. She stood her ground as the truth settled over the room like a heavy, final weight. The shouting died away, replaced by the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. Months passed, then years, and the sharp edges of the mansion softened. The heavy mahogany doors remained open, not for guests, but for those who needed a place to rest. The library, once a cage for schemes, now housed bookshelves reachable by everyone. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, warming floors that had once felt frozen in silence. In the hallways, the sound of labored footsteps was replaced by the low, rhythmic murmur of conversation and the occasional chime of a teacup. Eleanor walked through the garden, her pace slow and deliberate. She reached the stone plaque set into the rose-covered wall, the brass letters catching the final rays of the golden hour. She touched the cold metal, tracing the name beneath her fingers. The camera moved closer, focusing on her eyes, which held no trace of the years she had spent in the shadows. She looked directly into the lens, a small, calm smile touching her lips. "Wealth is not what you hoard," she said, her voice steady and clear against the evening air. "It is what you leave behind for others to carry forward." She turned back to the garden as the camera pulled away, revealing the estate bathed in long, peaceful shadows, a home that finally lived,